So, Doug, yesterday you sent me a link on Slack to a X post that says, "What a surprise! Brett Cooper and her mom engage in witchcraft." And as soon as I saw that, I was shocked, and then maybe not so surprised after that. It just seems like there's a trend in the culture, even in the conservative culture to an extent, where it's like once you start digging, you find out there's some sort of weird thing going on with the whole witchcraft scene, the witchcraft culture. So, what is this post all about?
For one, I think it's a little bit unfair to just straight up call her out on witchcraft, because technically it's a little bit different, but it's not that much different. So we might be splitting hairs here, but I think that is a very extreme way to say it. I think that, I've got a whole conclusion to what's actually going on with Brett Cooper that we'll get to at the end here. But what happened was she went on an interview with Shawn Ryan, who's a famous podcaster. He interviews all kinds of people. And they, at some point during the interview, they talked about her and her mother's history with visiting a medium, like a psychic, basically. And I got some of what she actually said, like the legitimate quotes here. And in all transparency, I didn't actually listen to this entire interview because it's like over 3 hours long. And I was like, I don't need to hear that whole thing. But I did listen to the parts where she talked about this and a little bit more, like outside of this, to make sure I wasn't taking anything out of context. She expressed that she would like to contact this medium and ask him some questions. And because she was telling a story about this medium that her mom had contacted. She said, "My mom visited mediums. I haven't done that, but I kind of want to." And then she said she was able to speak to Don, her first husband, hear from him. "I was just thinking about this medium and Googled him. I would love to go." So in this article that we have up here, we need to talk about Brett Cooper. This is a Christian author who digs into it, and she broke down what Cooper said. And I thought what she had to say was really good and fair. So I wanted to read this highlight here. "While Brett is telling the story to the interviewer, one of the small lamps in the background of the studio begins to dim in and out. Ryan, the host, acknowledges this event, and Brett automatically believes that her brother is in the room with her." So she does give some validity to this kind of thing. "After this, Brett admits that she believes in all that stuff, meaning that she believes in ghosts, psychics, and talking to the dead. It is because of this belief that she allows this spirit, who she thinks is her brother, to guide her life choices. Brett often states that she sees her brother, and it's because of her visions that she believes she is on the right path."
Wow.
And her brother, this says right here, later on in the show, Brett tells the story of her other brother who has schizophrenia. Her brother would constantly hear voices in his head telling him to do things that he didn't want to do.
Wow.
Weird stuff for sure. So, what do you think about all that? That's a little bit more insight on it.
Well, I mean, if you're hearing voices and you're seeing things, it's like you only have a couple options. There could be an actual mental disorder, right, going on. It could be in that sense true scientific schizophrenia or paranoia, or one of those disorders. It could also be something that's spiritual. And so, as a Christian, I believe that you could be hearing from God. You could be hearing from demons, like the demonic.
Yeah.
It's either light or dark, or maybe a mixture of both, whatever. But yeah, so I think, as a Christian, I would say that sounds pretty disturbing to me, Yeah. I want to be fair in judging Brett by her own standard. So I think if I sat down and had a conversation with her and to see where she's at spiritually with God, I would be asking some pretty challenging questions.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that the question becomes, does she know what she's doing? Like, does she understand what she's messing with when it comes to this stuff? Because so many people don't. They just think it's like fun and games. And they don't think much of it, or they do think it's real, but they don't understand the depths of it. Yeah. So if she doesn't know, then she definitely needs some guidance on it. But the other question that is baked here is, does she even want a Christian perspective on it? A lot of people assume that she's a Christian just because she is a conservative. And I think that is an unfortunate reality these days. People just go straight to conservative influencer equals Christian.
Right.
But I don't actually think that that's really the case here. She's influential in the Christian world simply by being a conservative, and she's surrounded by a lot of Christians, but to say that she's a Christian is actually an assumption. I can't find any evidence of her claiming to be a real Jesus following Christian or to have accepted Jesus in any way. In fact, there's a video right here. I pulled this one up. In this video, when is this? This is 2 years ago, just for clarity. She actually says, "I'm not even somebody that is a practicing Christian," which suggests that she probably believes in God. She might kind of believe in Christian principles, but she's not really like into it, you know?
Right.
But I did find a lot of evidence on some other things that I think are interesting. But before we get into all that evidence, I was going to hand it over to you for some spiritual side effects discussion, because when it comes to the psychic medium discussion about like, if you allow this stuff in your life, what happens? So I know you did some research on that. So what did you come up with?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I was to sit down with Brett, I would be asking her, "Hey, do you claim to be a Christian?" You know, and then depending on her answer, I would probably give her two separate answers, really. And so this answer is kind of a mix of both. I believe there's some spiritual side effects that are pretty obvious as a Christian to, you know, messing with psychics, mediums, occult practices, witchcraft, things like that. But not everybody's going to see it that way, and not everybody has that Christian lens, you know. So I'm going to bring a mix of both. But as far as spiritual side effects go, and we're doing this for the sake of our audience because we believe that, you know, I personally believe visiting a medium is always a bad choice. That's my personal view, and I don't want people to have a negative effect on their life based on that practice. You know, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of the spiritual side effects. I mean, if you go to somebody who claims to be a deliverance minister, they're going to give you story after story. I personally wrote a book for somebody. I ghost wrote a book many years back where they tell their story of all the negative or all the damaging effects they had in their life. And they kind of, in the story, they kind of pointed all back to the time where they went and started visiting a psychic, you know? And so I've had some personal interactions with people that have experienced these things. Investing can be confusing and scary, but it doesn't have to be. Genesis Gold Group takes the guessing out of the game and guides you on your gold investment journey. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections, kind of like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer high security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there, 100% owned by you. So don't wait to get started. Visit filibustedgold.com today for a free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group. This is a letter to the Catholic Church written in 2020. And so this bishop wrote this letter because he was noticing the correlation between people who were losing loved ones at that time and also the isolation effect that was happening, and how there was a large majority of people inside of the Catholic Church that were wanting to communicate with their lost loved ones and feeling isolated. And he noticed the trend or the temptation to go visit a psychic or a medium. And so he essentially wrote this letter saying, hey, and he really breaks it down, but his two main points are, he speaks of two hidden dangers associated with any form of divination, and including mediums, psychics, and the like. But he says, especially with consulting mediums, he says, first, the practice of attempting to circumvent God is a dangerous practice. So he's saying going around God to communicate with somebody, you know, instead of going to God. And then second, he says, in doing so, they these practices open one up to the demonic influence. So he's saying that's the second danger, is now you have unwanted guests in your life that you didn't want it, you know, ahead of time. This review in 2020, what they did was they did a review of people who were going to psychics or going to mediums, and they found that it's rare, but in 5 to 10% of the participants, they noticed an outcome of paranoia being induced, like a lifestyle paranoia, or what they considered spiritual crises. So to me, I'm like, ugh, was that like the demonic element, you know, rearing its ugly head after the fact? It's like, 5 to 10%. Like, I don't even want to take that chance, you know? But there's also a lot of research when it comes to the psychological or financial harms that, you know, and there's been clinical trials that have been done. And now I will say this, the research is limited, and sometimes, you know, you'll see research that shows the positive effect of going to a medium. You'll see that side of it as well if you go do the research. But what some of these studies have shown is that there can be a short-lived positive effect when it comes to, oh, I got to express my emotions, or I got to deal with this raw emotion, you know, and I feel a little better. But look at some of the long-term effects, and this is what concerns me. A 2021 survey of 734 adults using psychic consultations, they showed they were using it for help with stress or emotional problems, and they reported some short-term relief, but a subset experienced worsened anxiety or dependency with what they call psychic addiction, noted as a severe risk factor. And so what is psychic addiction? Well, it's where they couldn't stop going. It was they were emotionally like driven to continue visiting, and it caused a financial strain. And
so they got some sort of a dopamine reaction from it, like
yeah, and they describe, the participants actually described feelings of deception in the long run when they realized what was happening, and they also described eventually began to describe these consultations as failing to resolve the issues and actually exacerbating their personal isolation. So instead of going to friends or to, you know, a pastor or to family or whatever to help work through like very serious emotional trauma, I'm guessing, what ended up happening was there was a pattern of the more they would go, the more isolated they would become, you know, and it actually wouldn't resolve the issues. A 2023 analysis of 20 different, it was a clinical profiles they did on 20 different mediums, revealed higher rates of delusion, dissociative tendencies, and narcissistic traits within the people that were going to these mediums or these psychics. There's also a book from 1989. It's kind of old, but it's been updated a few times. Animalistic psychology, and it shows how mediums techniques have been shown to trigger confirmation bias. Which, you know, there's a lot of things in life that trigger confirmation bias. Social media being one of maybe social media. Is social media the medium of today? You know, that's a good question. But essentially, you know, clients would ignore inaccuracies and amplify the hits, the things that they got right. You know, same thing's happening on social media today. So, but as human beings, we have a tendency to do this, you know, and so, but they were just in that book, they talk about how it could lead to long-term disillusionment or impaired decision making, to where it kind of like got them to look at things through the wrong lens, and not a helpful lens, but something that continued a pattern of disillusion. And so, you know, there have been other studies, and some of them have shown, I just want to briefly touch on the fraud aspect of it. Some studies they've done some deep dives into just the tendencies when it comes to, you know, and I don't want to paint every psychic or medium, because I know there's individuals behind those businesses and stuff. I don't want to paint every single one of them as a bad person, but there have been a lot of tendencies shown through the studies for fraud or scams to be taking place, you know, instead of people legitimately believing what they're doing. A 2019 analysis of fraud complaints found psychics preyed on the bereaved, with 40% of cases involving emotional manipulation. So these are people that are in a very, you know, just a very difficult emotional state. They've lost somebody, you know, or they've lost a loved one or a friend, and they're just, you know, they're just open to fraud, right? Open to a scam, unfortunately. New York Times article from 2019, just the title of it: "Psychic who promised to lift curse gets prison time." Just you know, there's just some crazy stories out there. And you know, we've had there's a book called From Beyond the Grave: The Legal Regulation of Mediumship. I believe it's from 2012. But I think this is the one that actually talks about one of those studies that was done in 2009. But it concludes that the law has continually kind of struggled to adequately deal with the phenomenon of psychics and fraud, you know, taking place in scam. And so it's like, we've got to understand that going, you know, if somebody like here, I would say, please don't ever go to a psychic. But if you do, if that is something that you're into, and I'm begging you not to, but you know, if you do, just be aware of the tendencies in that industry, you know, and please protect yourself from those.
Yeah. So the psychic one, that psychic story, the one who promised to lift a curse and got prison time, I don't know if that's the same thing as actually here's the funny connection here with that. And Brett Cooper is that Brett Cooper did a whole podcast or whatever. She covered this story of this woman who did get prison time for misleading people. Like the woman claimed to have voices in her head that were telling her the truth about certain people, and so she would lead people astray, but it ended up being more about like human trafficking and stuff like that too. Like there's some weird stuff, but this woman got prison time for what she did, but she genuinely believed that she was helping people. And Brett Cooper did a whole thing on that, basically calling it out and pointing it out as crazy, which actually I might have that exact one linked here later on. So it begs the question then, like, does Brett Cooper know what she's messing with? It's because I think a lot of people watched this interview that she had and thought maybe she's young, she doesn't know what she's doing, she just is kind of like, you know, testing the waters on this, or she just doesn't understand. And so in order to really know, we have to just dig into what it is that she's said and done before. And I think that she does have an idea of what she's messing with, but it's a dangerous amount. It's not like she doesn't know. It's like she's right in that middle ground where she doesn't know enough to be scared of it, but she knows just enough to be interested in it. She knows the basic concepts of witchcraft. Actually, yeah, this is the video. In this video, the rise of fake gurus and online cults. This is where she talks about this this woman. I don't know if you can see it. I'm not going to bother trying to find her, but this is the video where she talks about that woman. And so she refers to witchcraft, and she refers to it as never a good sign. So she understands the dangers to a degree of what it is, but I'm not sure that she connected this woman's story with a medium, because I think maybe in her mind they might be different, and witchcraft is very deeply misunderstood, I think, and people have no idea just how innocent real witchcraft can appear. And so they think witchcraft is just like dark, brooding, evil, nasty things that happen in the corner, but witchcraft can be a lot of different things. She doesn't directly renounce witchcraft in this video, but you can tell that she's got a negative opinion, like saying, that's not great, don't do it, you know?
Right.
So that brings me to, I don't remember how I figured this out, but it brought me to, I noticed that she was a fan of Ayn Rand. And as soon as I saw that, it snapped. I was like, oh, we've got a different issue here. And so people might be wondering, well, why do we care about that? First, Ayn Rand rejects mysticism, but created objectivism. And here's a couple examples of Brett Cooper posting about it. She says, thrilled to announce I've convinced yet another man to read an Ayn Rand novel. Happy Tuesday. So she's a fan, right? Who needs self-help books when you have Ayn Rand? So she's very much a fan, which means she's read her stuff. She understands the philosophical concepts behind it. And I have read other articles where she talks about how it does influence her general personal philosophy. So Ayn Rand created objectivism. Objectivism is the belief that reality is objective, reason is the only guide, and the true purpose in life is pursuing one's own rational self-interest without sacrificing yourself to others or accepting sacrifice of others for yourself. It not only rejects mysticism, but also rejects Christianity, naturally, because the whole basis of Christianity is sacrifice, right? Like that is a large portion of what Christianity is, and objectivism rejects that entirely. Not only should you not sacrifice yourself for anyone else, but you shouldn't accept a sacrifice from anybody else for you either.
Interesting. So, it's another form of, it sounds, like it fits in line with humanism pretty closely. It's like a subset of that. If you're rejecting the idea of sacrifice for others being a good thing, then it's like, obviously completely rejecting Christianity, but also it's like then it has exalted the single human experience to the top, like in my mind, like that's what it is. Like, well, your human experience is the most valuable thing possible, and not only Christianity, but like history, I think has proven that wrong, because it's like, what are the most beautiful, and there's that there's a quote from Ayn Rand right there that talks about beauty, on that post right there. But it's like, what is the most beautiful thing that you can do? Well, a person literally sacrificing themselves for somebody else, whether it be a child or something. It's like, and now there can be extreme negative examples of that? Absolutely.
Mhm.
You know, and there can be a negative way, like, well, I'm going to live my life for other people, but it's like, you're not doing it in a healthy way, you know?
Mhm.
But I mean, that is the most beautiful thing that a person can do, you know? And I think that's
Yeah,
why the story of Jesus is so impactful on, you know, history and cultures throughout history, is because there isn't a more beautiful story than that.
yeah.
You know, that
So
somebody setting their own needs aside for the sake of someone else because they love them, you know, like that is,
absolutely.
and I think that's what you lose with objectivism, is you lose real love, you know, and it's replaced with self-love, you know,
Ooh,
and yeah,
yeah,
that's tough. I think there's also, you make a good point about you know, magic and witchcraft too, and it's like, I think that is where stories like Harry Potter and things like that, whenever witchcraft gets, you know, into the mainstream, it's where that's one of the dangers of a story like that, you know. And I'm not completely against fantasy novels and things like that, but you know, and I think there's a difference between practicing something in real life and you know, a fantasy world, like I'm all down with reading C.S. Lewis and stuff. It's like, that's
yeah,
fine. You know, I know some people are against it, whatever. We've had the whole Lord of the Rings discussion. We'll probably have the Harry Potter discussion on this channel at some point too.
yeah.
But
Okay.
but I think it has created a mainstream version of the idea that there's bad magic and good magic, you know.
Yes.
And I think that is the difference. That's where in Christianity, it really draws a fine line. It says, no, there's not bad magic and good magic. They're just magic, you know, and it's all
Yeah.
witchcraft and it's all bad,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, it is all circumventing God.
Mhm.
And it causes us to be very cautious and careful about anything that could be headed in that direction.
Yeah, and man, it's interesting to see her making these kinds of decisions or putting this kind of stuff out here, because on the one hand, she has this extreme influence of somebody like Ayn Rand, but then on the other hand, she's interested in this thing that objectivity or objectivism outright rejects. So that kind of like this is all boiling up to a point here that I have at the end, but I want to talk about one more thing before I get to that point, and it is related in a very interesting way. And what we're talking about here is influence. What are we influenced by? Because she's an influencer, she's influenced by something, and then she's taking that influence and influencing others, particularly the younger crowd. So we have to get to the root of, well, what is that influence coming? Where is it coming from? Where are the roots? And so this is going to sound off for a second, but there's a point here. There's also a difference between Luciferianism and Satanism. It's
Mm.
relevant. Well, people conflate these two, but they're actually kind of opposites in a way. What people think is Satanism is actually Luciferianism. We're not going to talk about the Luciferianism. We're going to talk about what Satanism is. And I'm going to pull up this article here, and it's a little bit aggressive because this is actually from a Satanist website. So viewer beware. It's got pentagrams and stuff, but honestly, I don't really take it that seriously personally. So this is an article written by a Satanist.
Mm.
I don't know this person. I just understand this website, and I can tell that this is a legitimate Satanist. Like, this person is pretty deep in it. So Satanism is, in all but name, a type of objectivism, which is Ayn Rand's philosophy that she created, but it has a hedonistic flair, I like to say. So
Wow.
this article actually points out the 4 differences between objectivism and Satanism, which I think is important to note. But then also talks about some of the similarities, and the similarities are very interesting. So Satanism simply takes objectivism to the next level, but at the core, they're kind of the same approach to life, which is rational self-interest, reason above all, do as thou wilt, personal sovereignty. The differences lie in the extreme. So Satanism encourages hedonism and an animalistic mindset, whereas objectivism doesn't necessarily encourage that. Objectivism prizes altruism, Satanism discourages it, for one example. So they do depart ways. But here's another interesting point about it. Anton LaVey, for those who don't know, was a satanic high priest and author of the Satanic Bible, was heavily influenced by Ayn Rand. So he saw something in there that he liked for his own religion.
Wow.
And this all comes down to a type of witchcraft, because there are truths in here, but they are not truthfully spoken, and they are taken to some type of extreme. So none of this is a critique on Cooper herself, but more of like a warning. objectivism and even New Age spiritualism, which would be, you know, mediums and psychics and all that. They seem innocent on the surface, but when you really dig down deep, you start finding stuff like this.
Wow.
And this is what's driving it. So curiously, Cooper is heavily influenced by Rand, who arguably is objectivism because she created it, but then shows interest in things that aren't so objective and leans more mystic, like psychics. So my bottom line is, and I'll let you give your thoughts after I throw this line out here. I believe that Brett has a deep but innocent curiosity, which we all have. Obviously, I do too. I have a lot of these same interests, but I just know where to draw the line. And she understands the danger to an extent, but I don't think she fully understands it. In fact, I see a little bit of me in her with this kind of thing. So I understand where she's coming from with it. I'm deeply curious about many things as well. I obviously love things like, you know, Cthulhu. That's a deep, dark, evil thing, but I know where to draw the line as a story, right? So,
right. Well, I think there's a difference between viewing something as a myth or a legend, you know, or like from the story perspective versus practicing witchcraft, you know, like there's a big difference. And I think every good Christian writer understands that, or else you're not a good Christian writer anymore. You know, like a fantasy and that kind of stuff. It's like, if you're going to be writing if you're going to be writing fiction, it's like you have to understand the difference. I want to agree wholeheartedly with your conclusion, you know, and like that warning to Brett that she doesn't really understand. And I think really it's the fact that she thinks that she's hearing from her brother and seeing her brother normally, you know, who passed away, and that he's kind of guiding her life in that way. I would say that is to me, that lands me at a very strong conclusion of, Brett, you need to talk to a Christian. You need to get saved. You need Jesus, because that's not healthy and that's not good. So,
and also that's not your brother.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, we 100% believe like that's not your brother. That's going to lead you down a place you don't want to go.
Right.
And so my appeal to Brett Cooper would be, get a real Christian mentor if that's what you want. If you want to know some truth, do that, because otherwise you're playing with fire and you're I hate to be all cliche, but you're going to get burned at some point. It's going to happen.
Gold is not just a backup plan if the world falls apart. It's an investment opportunity that could set you up for generations. There's never really a bad time to invest in gold, but you want to make sure you have the right guide. And that is where Genesis Gold Group shines. Whether you are a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, their trusted expertise and competitive pricing makes them an easy choice. They offer tangible assets in case of emergencies, but they can also design the perfect IRA just for you. And they'll even cut through all that confusing red tape from the IRS. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer a more high-security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there and 100% owned by you. Genesis Gold Group is a safe, simple, and convenient way to invest. Visit filibustedgold.com today for your free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.